What's up? What's happening? It's a wonderful Thursday afternoon in the capital city, and I am Guy Remember-in-Chief of 580 Sports Talk, Dan Lucero, and it's been a minute since I've given you an Immaculate Grid with Dan video and remembered some guys with you, the listener/YouTube subscriber. If you like this video and you're not subscribed to the 580 Sports Talk YouTube channel, you should do that. You get all of our other great video content, including, of course, the daily talk show, 580 Sports Talk, which we stream live from 3 to 6, Monday through Friday, with me and all my pals. And you get these Immaculate Grid videos, which are made whenever I have the occasion to make one. And today is one of those occasions. So let's remember some baseball players, shall we? It will be a baseball grid today. And would you look at that? We've got the Kansas City Royals on today's baseball grid. This is grid number 529, recording this on Thursday, September 12th. So grid 529, if you catch this a week later and you want to play along and still try to beat my score. I don't think you're going to, but you are more than welcome to give it a shot. So the Royals are one of the columns today, along with the Rangers and batters with 2,000 or more career hits. The Rows of the Toronto Blue Jays, the Philadelphia Phillies, and players with a single season of 200 hits or more. Royals don't have a lot of those. So let's go ahead and start bottom middle. We'll start with the Royals' 200 hit seasons. They really don't have many in their history. George Brett, the only Royal to do it twice. Willie Wilson is the all-time leader in single season hits for the Royals. I'm going to go with good old Mike Sweeney to start our Immaculate Grid today. Good old Mike Sweeney in there at 3%. Mike Sweeney, beloved Royal, could have put up some really big numbers if he could have stayed healthy, which he had trouble doing into his late 20s and early 30s, which sort of marred the end of his Royals career. But man, when he was good, he was really good. And in 2000, he had 206 hits, batted .333 that year, and made the first of what would be 5 All-Star game appearances with the Royals. Heck of a career. 1,540 hits, so we can't use him in the 2,000 career hits column. But we can use another former Royal who got 200 hits in a season. We'll use Johnny Damon here. About the caveman, Johnny Damon. 0.3%. Hey, look at that. They even give him a headshot with the Royals lid on. Almost unrecognizable as that version of himself on Baseball Reference. Sometimes it pops up a different picture, and this time it's given us the Royals version of Johnny Damon, who, of course, was outstanding, had 214 hits in 2000. So if I'm remembering right, I think he and Sweeney are the only Royals teammates to each get 200 hits in the same season. Damon hit 327 that year, led the American League in steals and runs scored. It was a great season. Of course, in 2001, he was no longer a Royal, having been shipped off to Oakland. So those are our first two. Let's finish off this column. Let's put a name in the Blue Jays column for 2,000 career hits that I bet more people are going to put in the Phillies column. Let's go with the Hall of Famer Scott Rowland here. You might not remember Scott Rowland's time with the Toronto Blue Jays. It was just a season and a half towards the end of his career. It was actually where he went after St. Louis. Obviously spent the first part of his career in Philadelphia, then went on to much more renown as a member of those Cardinals teams in the mid-2000s, world champion in 2006. After he left St. Louis, he was in Toronto for a season and a half before moving on in a trade to Cincinnati, and that's where he finished out his career. But not many people remember that for 203 games, he was a Toronto Blue Jay, racked up 2,077 career hits in what was an outstanding career, and 2% put him in this here column. As for the Phillies, you could go with a guy like, you go old school, you go Richie Ashburn, their great leadoff hitter for many years in the 50s. You could go with some more modern players as well. I'm thinking back to the 80s, back when it seemed like every member of the old Cincinnati Reds Big Red Machine joined the Phillies. Not going Pete Rose here, though. Going to go with Tony Perez. Tony Perez, 1%. The outstanding Cuban third baseman / first baseman. Spent just 1 year with the Phillies, 1983. That was a memorable year for the Phillies as they went on to win the pennant but lose to the Orioles in the World Series. 2,732 hits for Tony Perez. Took him a long time to get in the Hall of Fame, longer than it probably should have. Tony Perez in that square. How about 200 hits for the Rangers? My first thought was Michael Young, but if that's my first thought, I bet that's a lot of people's first thoughts. Let's go with somebody a little bit more obscure. Let's go back to the 70s and 80s for Al Oliver. One of the more underrated players of his era, left-handed hitting outfielder and first baseman. Spent 4 seasons with Texas, and one of those, 1980, he had 209 hits. One of 2 200-hit seasons in his career. 2,743 hits, a lifetime 300 hitter, but people don't remember Al Oliver. He didn't hit for the power that you expect first baseman to hit for, and he is not in Cooperstown. And I'm not advocating necessarily that he ought to be, but Al Oliver, one of the great forgotten players of the 70s and the 80s. Let's do the Rangers column and finish it off. For the Rangers and the Phillies, we're going to go with a guy who was a former Royal. And I got to shout out my guy Trenton Kraxner for this one. Neftali Feliz is going to be my answer here. Now, it's a bit of a cheat because Trenton Kraxner, former 5A Sports Talk intern, when he was on the show, we did a segment on our show called Name That Guy, which sparked the idea for these Immaculate Grid videos. And one of the guys that we remembered on the show one day was Neftali Feliz. And I had completely forgotten he was a Royal late in his career. He came up with a lot of to-do as the Rangers closer. And if you recall the 2011 World Series, he was on the mound when the Rangers were 1 strike away from that championship before giving up the tying triple to David Freese. Well, his arm went bad, and he really kicked around late in his career, including a very brief stop with the Phillies that I have to confess I would not have remembered if it had not been for Trenton Kraxner and his ability to recall him on Name That Guy. So greatly appreciative to Trenton for Neftali Feliz. We owe him for that one. For the Rangers and the Blue Jays, I'm going with one of the best relievers of the 90s. That would be Tom Henke. You look at the guy, it looks like an actuary, but the Terminator was his nickname. Does anybody ever look less like a Terminator than this guy, Tom Henke? But nah, man, he was really good, particularly with the Blue Jays. He was their closer as they rode to prominence and won championships in 1992. He was a key part of that team, saving 34 games. They moved on to Texas, saved a career-high 40 games the very next year in his mid-30s. He actually started with Texas as well before going to Toronto. So 8% there. Many people remember Tom Henke in his time with both the Blue Jays and the Rangers. All right, let's finish off this Royals column, and we'll start in the middle with the Royal who is fondly remembered, another reliever on the board, Ryan Madsen. Ryan Madsen, just 1% for Ryan Madsen. That's strange to me. Ryan Madsen was out of the bigs for 2 years before resurfacing with the 2015 Royals, rather. And he was a huge part of that bullpen. We all remember HDH, and of course, Greg Holland burned out at the end of 2015 and didn't get to finish that season. But Ryan Madsen was every bit as good as those guys that year. 2.13 ERA, saved 3 games in his 68 appearances. After having had a long run with the Phillies, felt like his career might have been over in his early 30s, but that 2015 season with the Royals gave him a second wind in his career, and he ended up pitching up until 2018 with Washington and the Dodgers before he called it quits. Finally, we have the Blue Jays and the Royals, and of course, we remember that those teams have made some trades with each other fairly frequently in recent years, including the Whit Merrifield deal a couple of years back, sending the Royal, who would have been a fit down in this square, the 200-hit Royal square, Whit Merrifield to Toronto. But I'm going to put in one of the 2 guys the Royals got back. One of them was Samad Taylor. He never made it to the big leagues with the Blue Jays, I don't believe. But the other player did. My guy, La Papa, the potato, Max Castillo, for a 19 rarity score. Love that. Max Castillo, 3.3%. He's got a Phillies hat on. I didn't know he had made it to Philadelphia. And I don't know what major league organization, if it's a major league organization, he's even in now. But he had made his debut, 9 appearances with the Blue Jays before coming over to the Royals in 2022. 5 appearances with that team, 7 appearances in 2023. And that was it for him. Last seen Max Castillo pitching in the minor leagues for the Phillies this season, but to no great distinction. And even though he's just 25, it kind of would be a surprise we saw Max Castillo in the bigs again. But we're seeing him on the Immaculate Grid today. And that concludes today's Immaculate Grid. Again, a rarity score of 19. Get in the comments. See if you can beat it. See if you've got a better answer for one of my squares. I'm already thinking of a better, more prominent one for the Phillies and the Rangers. Roy Oswalt would have been a great answer. So, want to hear who you would put in these squares, particularly the Royals column, if you're watching and you're a big Royals fan. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. Thanks for remembering some guys with me on this Thursday.